Hello, I'm Helen Wood. I'd like to invite you to join me for a look at life and work in different parts of the British Isles. We'll be meeting people with various occupations. They use everyday language in a variety of accents. Today we're in London, and in this programme we will be looking at the British press and the work of a journalist.
Ruth Gledhill is the religion correspondent of The Times, traditionally the newspaper of the British establishment. She's on her way past Westminster Abbey to Church House, where we've arranged to meet.
Ruth, we're here at Church House. Can you tell me what Church House is?
Church House lies at the very centre of the British establishment. Parliament, which lies a few yards away from here, even met in Church House during the war. It's in the shadow of Westminster Abbey and is in fact the administrative headquarters of the Church of England. The Church of England has its own parliament called the General Synod, which meets here 3 times a year. And as religion correspondent for The Times, I spend a lot of time here covering meetings. Often this is where the archbishops of the church make their most important speeches. It's where the church hammers out its views on politics, its views on social issues of the day, and on other issues that affect both the church and the national life of the country.
Why did you become a religious affairs correspondent?
Well, as a child, my ambition was always to be a missionary. I thought I had a religious vocation, and that probably came from seeing my father, who was a clergyman in the Church of England. But when we came back from Jamaica, where he was serving as a missionary, I set eyes on a copy of the Sun newspaper, which had just been bought by Rupert Murdoch, and I immediately lost my missionary vocation and decided I wanted to be a journalist. I liked the wild headlines and the lively copy of the Sun.
Did you go to the Sun?
No, I never did, in fact. My first job as a journalist was on the Birmingham Post and Mail, which is England's leading provincial newspaper. From there I went to the Daily Mail, which also I would consider one of the country's leading tabloids. It's a middle market tabloid. And then from the Daily Mail I came to the Times. And when I was at the Times, I found out that religion was an up-and-coming subject, and it was a way of combining my 2 vocations of missionary and of journalist.
Do you think the editor offered you the job of religious affairs correspondent because of your background?
I think he offered me the job because I had established myself as a news reporter, and at the time religion was thought to be, perhaps by some people, a bit detached from the demands of ordinary news subjects, and the editor very much wanted religion to be treated like politics, like social affairs, like health.
You told me about the first religious story you covered, the ordination of women.
That has been, I suppose, one of the main stories of my work as religion correspondent, but it hasn't been the only story. There have also been stories about the royal marriage, for example, because in this country the church is established. The Queen is Supreme Governor of the Church of England, and Prince Charles will one day be Supreme Governor when he takes the place of his mother as head of the country, as king. So it's obviously the issue of the royal marriage is very important. It's crucial to our coverage of church and state. So I've been very involved in that, as well as women priests.
Do you have any other jobs or any other tasks at the Times?
Yes, in fact, my jobs at the Times seem to keep increasing day by day. Besides covering news on the religious front, I also cover news on the charity front sometimes. Recently, I went abroad to Rwanda to cover the refugee disaster over there, and I wrote a big story about the international efforts of the Red Cross. Then also, I do my favourite job of all. I visit a church each week, or a synagogue or a mosque, and I write about the service. And it's almost like a religious version of a food review. I give stars for the sermon, for after-service care. I give stars for the architecture, for liturgy and for music, and generally write a review of the service and of the welcome I get and of how I generally feel about it. And I also give stars for the spiritual high, the sense of spiritual satisfaction I obtain from the service. And this is widely read, this column, and it's even been published as a book recently.
Let's have a closer look at the press. Some newspapers are called broadsheets because they have a large, wide format. They're often referred to as quality papers because they're supposed to be serious in the way they treat the news. The Times is perhaps the most famous quality broadsheet. Its rivals are The Guardian, The Independent, The Daily Telegraph, and The Financial Times, Europe's business paper. Other papers are called tabloids because they have smaller pages so that they can be handled easily. Most of them are popular papers, each with a circulation of more than 1 million readers a day, and they usually have a rather sensational approach to the news. For a time, Ruth worked on the Daily Mail. She referred to it as a middle-market tabloid because it's aimed at readers who want a fairly serious approach. All these are national papers produced in London. There are also excellent provincial papers produced outside London. Ruth started her career with a provincial paper, the Birmingham Post and Mail. Let's see which papers people actually read and why.
Excuse me, what paper do you read?
The Daily Mail.
Why do you read the Daily Mail?
It's a quality paper and I don't like broadsheets.
I read the Daily Mail and the Sunday Times.
Why do you read the Sunday Times?
I really read it for the culture, about theatre, cinema.
Which newspaper do you read?
The Times.
Why do you read the Times?
It reflects things in the way that I want to read them. Most of the stories are fairly unbiased, or I feel that anyway.
What paper do you read?
The Independent.
Why do you read The Independent?
I think it's got good writers, especially on the entertainment section. I think they're very good on TV and film.
What paper do you read?
The Guardian.
Why do you read The Guardian?
Well, it provides quite good factual accounts of everyday news and it's fairly unbiased newspaper.
Do you read it for a certain section?
No, just general news. It's quite good for international news as well.
So Ian, which newspaper do you read?
At the moment I'm reading every British newspaper I can get hold of because they're all reviewing Richard III, and as they all like Richard III, I'm enjoying the papers for the first time for a long time. What do I normally get? I read The Independent and The Guardian, and on Sunday I generally see The Independent and The Observer, and but not every week. I don't take a daily newspaper.
Do you read the Sunday papers for certain sections?
Well, I throw away the business section, the financial section, the sports section, the fashion section, the travel section, and I read the news and the arts.
Apart from the news, people often choose papers to suit their own tastes or interests. So, most daily papers and all Sunday papers have special interest sections and separate supplements which look in detail at various subjects such as entertainment, sport, personal finance, and so on. Some of these sections form part of the paper itself. Others are separate supplements. And some supplements are in the form of colour magazines with lots of advertisements. And because each subject is dealt with separately and is clearly identified, you can easily find the supplements you want. And you can get rid of the ones that don't interest you. Because newspapers go to press at around 7 or 8 in the evening, Ruth doesn't have to be in her office until 10 o'clock.
When I get there, then it's hectic. I start by opening my post. We don't have secretaries. Everyone thinks the Times is incredibly high-tech and we all have millions of secretaries and assistants, but we don't. I go through the post and then I check my diary to see if I have any stories to go to. I'll maybe write a story first thing from a press release that I've had. I'll answer the telephone, I'll listen to my telephone messages. Yes, that would be great. I'm around all day today. Thank you very much for your help. Okay, bye-bye. Then, after that, I will speak to the news editor and discuss that day's stories with him. I'll go through my schedule for the week and we will decide whether maybe a tip-off I've had, whether it's worth pursuing, or whether I should just, what we call spike it, put it on the spike, which means that it's dead forever and ever, unless another newspaper does it, and then I have to follow it up again.
It's going to be even worse than that.
After that, there might be a conference with the editor when I might discuss future plans. I'll discuss what I'll be doing for my actual service column, be discussing the major issues we should be following up and whether I should be interviewing any bishops.
We're putting at your service this column on our going out page, and we want to list that to some listings of church events. How are we getting on with that? Are we actually getting any church events that we can list?
Got one or two last week. There just weren't enough last week. The very big one last week was the Billy Graham Worldwide Evangelism Programme, which was going out on satellite.
Religious subjects I want to discuss. First of all, Ruth's interview with the bishop. How's that coming on?
It's coming on quite well. He's agreed to see me next week, and I'm going to discuss the future of the church as the millennium approaches.
Let's go with Ruth as she drives across London and over the River Thames to Lambeth Palace for her interview. Ruth is going to talk to the bishop at Lambeth, who assists the Archbishop of Canterbury, the spiritual leader of the Church of England. Lambeth Palace has been the Archbishop of Canterbury's home in London since the early 13th century.
Good morning, Bishop.
Morning.
We're still hearing lots of stories, and we have heard them continually since the 60s, that the church is about to die out. Prophets of gloom say no one believes in God anymore, and they won't want to go to church. How do you feel the church is faring into the next millennium?
Well, I think that is a very pessimistic view, and I think that the indications recently are that we've bottomed out, as it were, for our membership, and it's beginning to rise again now. The main problem, of course, is to address how we give the good news to the young and how they're able to respond to it in their own way and in their own culture.
So you think the church does have a future?
Of course.
And what kind of future do you think that is? Do you really think you can get young people back in again?
Well, I would have thought so. I think the indications are that they will come in, but I think the church has got to address the problems of the day, and the church has got to show that its faith has integrity, and that it's got something to say to people about everyday life.
Now, the Church of England is part of the worldwide Anglican Communion, and people say that in the whole world that the church is actually growing, the Christian faith is growing. What part does the Church of England, a very secularised Western society, part of it, what part does it have to play in that?
Well, I would question whether the Church of England is as secularised as some parts of the continent of Europe. But certainly it is more secularised than parts of the Third World. I think that the growth in the Third World is because the people find in the Anglican faith real meaning for their own lives. I think it's a transfer very often from what might be called heathen religions, and they're finding in the Anglican Church a place where they can belong and play their part.
And what part does the Archbishop of Canterbury have to play in all that?
Well, of course, he is the primate of all England, and so sits with the other primates of the Anglican Communion. And I suppose he is given a primacy of honour amongst them, so he's first amongst equals. And of course, it's his initiative at which the Lambeth Conference is called. And also he takes initiatives in places like Rwanda and those parts of the world where the Anglican Church is important.
The Church of England is part of the Anglican Communion, a group of broadly similar churches throughout the world. It's the established church of the United Kingdom, with Her Majesty the Queen as its head or supreme governor. She is also called Defender of the Faith. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the primate of all England, is its spiritual leader. It's a Protestant church. It was formed in protest against the Roman Catholic Church in the 16th century. There are other Protestant denominations or religious groups in Britain. For example, the Presbyterian Church, which is the largest denomination in Scotland. Some denominations are non-conformist. They do not follow the practices of the established church. The Methodist Church, for example, is one of the most famous of these non-conformist churches. The afternoon is a busy time for Ruth.
I'll have to work really hard, be at my typewriter or at my computer terminal, putting in everything that I can. I have to write my copy for the first edition, and the deadline for that is really 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Is there a reason for joining your work?
So it's a real panic will set in if I haven't, for example, received a phone call that I need in order to stand a story up, or if someone is being dilatory in sending me a press release, or if our fax system isn't working, as it often isn't. But after I've finished my story, I will input it into the system. From there it goes to the news desk, and from there it goes to what we call the sub-editors, who then check it for commas, full stops, for grammatical errors, for any contradictions or errors of style. From them it then goes to the back bench. The back bench are the final arbiters of the story. They take a particular interest for any story that's going on the front page. They will put the headlines on the story, and they will determine the final placings of everything in the paper. And they will then, what we call, put the paper to bed. They'll press the button on the computer that sets the presses rolling, and then you have a newspaper the next day.
Since 1986, many British newspapers have been based in the Docklands area of East London. The Times now operates from a former warehouse in Wapping, where I'm going to interview the editor, Peter Stoddard. Mr. Stoddard, can you give us a brief history of the Times?
The Times is the oldest national daily newspaper in Britain. We've been printing since 1785. So that's more than 200 years old, and we've printed ever since. The Times was founded by a man who was effectively a printer, and he invented a new printing process which enabled newspapers to be printed in a proper, efficient, and for the first time, commercial way. The Times has always been a technologically innovative paper right up to the present day, when we're one of the leading players on the internet.
Could you tell me about the different kinds of news and topics covered in the Times?
Foreign news coverage has always been at the heart of the Times' advantage in this country. We have more than a dozen full-time correspondents around the world, and we've just recently opened bureaus in Peking. So we have a very strong foreign service, and at a time when other newspapers are cutting back, we're keeping very much that going, and indeed expanding it. But of course we have stringers, as we call them, across the globe.
What is a stringer?
More than 60 people who get part of their income from working for the Times. There are still huge areas that newspapers can cover, and good newspaper journalists can cover, truths that they can get at that aren't available to television or to radio.
Why is that?
Well, because we're not driven by pictures. We don't have to compress our thoughts into a very short space. We don't have to make them immediately palatable to millions of people. We can campaign day after day. We can uncover a little bit here and a little bit there. We don't have to make it all packaged up immediately. There are lots of advantages that quality newspapers have over both tabloid newspapers and over TV and radio.
What other news do you cover in the paper?
The Times had traditional authority in economics, domestic politics, foreign affairs, and what one might call the key serious issues. We had the best letters, we still have the best letters, we have the best obituaries. And it's really that's the extension of the authority of the Times into areas where previously people didn't think the Times was very strong. So now we have the Fashion Journalist of the Year in this country. The preeminent fashion writer is the fashion editor of the Times. We have the best car supplement, which people wouldn't normally have thought that we would naturally do. Restaurant critics, gardening, genuine, leisure sections of one sort or another. We have cultural areas, religious areas, artistic and musical areas. And there's a huge readership out there who want detailed knowledge. I mean, just to take religion, we have the best religious correspondent in Ruth Gledhill, and we give her a lot of space, and she does a lot of work for us. She's the most respected writer about religion in this country. So when news happens, she hears about it first, so we get the best news coverage.
Have these news sections actually increased the circulation of the Times?
Oh, the circulation of the Times has more than doubled in the last 3 years. So now we sell 800,000 copies on a Saturday. So more than twice what we were a few years ago, more than 4 times what we would have been when I joined the paper.
Tell me about your move to Wapping.
Well, the Times led the whole of the British newspaper industry out of the old trade union-dominated plants up in Fleet Street and Gray's Inn Road. It was a very dramatic day. There were sort of pickets outside, strikers. Suddenly there was a strike was on. And within hours we were driving a couple of miles down to Wapping, where this brand new plant was waiting. The trade unions barely knew that it was there. And we missed that one night's production. And we're back the following Monday in a completely different world, a completely different newspaper world, where we could produce our own papers. All the mistakes were ours instead of mistakes introduced or indeed sometimes even censored in by printers.
I noticed a painting on the wall that shows somebody reading the Times. Who's that by, and what is it?
It's by Benjamin Hayton, and it's called Waiting for the Times, the 19th century picture, and much loved by all editors of the Times.
In the Times nowadays, a lot of the news reports are written by the paper's own staff journalists. Some of the foreign news here is provided by the Times' foreign correspondents, who work in many parts of the world. Other news comes from freelance reporters, some of them known as stringers, or by means of press releases from news agencies. Then there are feature articles by well-known journalists, and sketch writers comment, for example, on politics in their own regular and often humorous columns. Even more light-hearted is the Times Diary, with its accompanying cartoon. The leading articles, or leaders, are the responsibility of the editor and his editorial staff. They appear in the middle of the paper, next to the letters to the editor. Many of these are written by well-known people who find the correspondence columns of the Times the best place to air their views. Traditionally, the Times has always published the court circular, giving news of the royal family's activities and engagements. There are obituaries of prominent people who have recently died, and extensive reviews of artistic events and personalities, and of course, full coverage of sports and of business affairs. In her leisure time, Ruth has a rather unusual pastime.
My hobby is ballroom dancing, and I was lucky to meet a partner on the dance floor who subsequently asked me to marry him, and I agreed. Our eyes met across a crowded room, and we fell instantly in love. And we compete together in amateur ballroom dance competitions, and we're doing quite well at the moment. We've won a lot of trophies, and we're hoping to make a success of that in our private lives.
You married recently, didn't you? Where did you get married?
We married a few weeks ago. We in fact had 2 weddings. We were very lucky. Our first wedding was in Barbados. We flew aboard and we married under the palm trees on a wonderful sunny day on a bandstand in the middle of a swimming pool, surrounded by bathers, sunbathers, drinking champagne and crying as the priest made us man and wife. Then when we came back to this country, we had a blessing conducted by the Archbishop of York, Dr. David Hope, in St. Bride's Church in Fleet Street, which, because of its beautiful spire, is known as the Wedding Cake Church.
And it's also a very special church if you're a journalist, isn't it?
St. Bride's Church is the journalist church. It's where many of the memorials are held for journalists, say, killed in action abroad, and it's where many journalists do get married and also go to church, because it's in Fleet Street, which was once the home of all British newspapers. Of course, we have all now left Fleet Street, but it's still considered our spiritual home.
And what does your husband do? Is he a journalist?
No, Andrew is not a journalist. He works in finance, and he's in a senior management position at the moment in one of our country's banks.
Are you a Londoner, Ruth?
I suppose I'm actually an Essex girl. I was born in Loughton in Essex, and in Britain there are many jokes associated with Essex girls, but I try and escape my roots by using the argument that when I was 18 months old, my parents went abroad to the West Indies, so I was actually brought up in the West Indies. Then when we came back to this country, we lived all over the country, finally moving to London, where I live today.
Tell me about some of your special places in London. Where do you like to go on a Saturday?
I particularly like shopping in Harrods. I also like shopping in Selfridges. I like walking up the King's Road, which is still a big, fashionable place to go on Saturday mornings, on Sundays. And I like to meet friends for coffee and tea in the many cafes along the King's Road, and we sit and look at all the passing tourists and try and look at the passing fashions and maybe update the clothes we're wearing.
We leave you with these pictures of Chelsea. In our next programme, we'll be in Cambridge to find out about education. See you then. Goodbye.